Welcome back. You're still watching S8 Today. Now, days after the first cases of COVID-19 were reported in East Africa, schools in Kenya and Rwanda have suspended learning on Monday as countries seek to contain the spread of the deadly virus. We're now joined on the line from Nairobi by our correspondent there, Sarah Kimani. Sarah, thanks very much indeed for joining us. After our last conversation over the weekend, a lot has happened. What's the situation in Kenya now?
Maybe let me begin by the situation in the East African region. Good afternoon, Peter. Tanzania and Somalia have just reported each their first positive cases of COVID-19. The case in Tanzania is a lady who traveled from Belgium into Tanzania aboard a Rwanda air flight, while the person in Somalia is said to have come in from China a while ago. So those are the latest numbers from the East African region. Now, in terms of what is happening in Kenya today, we visited a number of schools, and parents in boarding schools who have pupils in boarding schools were picking their children from school, and in schools that are day schools, they remained completely shut today. Only a few pupils would walk in, pick their books and leave. Some of the universities have also begun closing. Senates in various universities across the country had meetings, and they have given the university students up to Friday this week to wind up and leave the premises. At the University of Nairobi, where we went, the university has been closed indefinitely, but online and distance learning, according to the university administration, will continue for now.
So the University of Nairobi shut down, but what about other institutions like the University of Nairobi in other parts of the country?
The senates in various universities were still sitting, but the president had given up to Friday this week for universities to have closed. He called it a first closure of learning institutions. So they still have to have up to Friday this week. But most interesting is that the government was actually also issuing directives on how pupils who are in boarding schools, especially in high schools and colleges and institutions of higher learning, how they should be transported home, indicating that there should be very minimum contact with what you would call the outside world. They're asking that school buses and institution buses actually transport them either home or nearest to their homes, where they will have very little contact with other people, because they have almost been quarantined because they have been inside their institutions all this time.
Here in South Africa, most schools were going to be closing soon anyway, so perhaps not too much time lost. What's the situation in Kenya? Is this right in the middle of a school term, or is a lot of school going to be lost as a result of this?
There's just 2 weeks before schools close, so a lot of schools were just winding up their first-term syllabuses. Some of them were actually doing their revisions ahead of examinations, which would have begun either this week or next week. So there is, of course, some lost time, because then it means pupils have closed school without having done their end-of-term examinations. Probably a bit okay, because it is the first term. Had it been the end of the year, then there would have been problems, because that is when the country carries out end-of-year examinations, which determine entry into the next grade, but also determines for some entry into high school or entry into the university. So for now, that seems okay. However, I've been following conversation online, and a lot of parents are worried on how do they move from here, especially because it is an indefinite closure. So there's a lot of preparation for homeschooling. Some parents also hiring tutors, private tutors, to continue teaching their children at home. Others just taking it easy for now. International schools, however, most of which have also closed, seem to have been better prepared. I've seen a lot of them talking to the parents and issuing, how education will continue online, and how most of education now moves from face-to-face to online learning.
All right, we spoke about Tanzania and Somalia a little earlier. What about other countries like Uganda and Rwanda? What are they doing at this time?
Uganda, as of now, has not reported any positive cases, but it has also taken very stringent measures. For example, it has barred anybody from what is called the epicenters of the disease from entering the country, including its own citizens. But it has also said if any of those people then get into the country, they must undertake quarantine for 14 days, supervised by the government, but they have to pay for it. So far, they have not reported any cases. In Rwanda, they have closed the borders to any people from the countries that are said to be epicenter countries. They have closed schools. They have banned public gatherings. And unlike countries like Kenya, where they have been very, cautious on how they deal with their places of worship, Rwanda has been outright from the word go that even places of worship must now be closed to reduce contact between people. They have also indicated that even public events like football matches or public gatherings and what they call the car-free day, all those have been temporarily or indefinitely suspended for now. Ethiopia today also announced that they will be closing schools, but institutions of higher learning remain open. Ethiopian Airlines is also operating in all its destinations. The Ethiopian government still has not taken has not given any indication whether Ethiopian will stop flying in and out of any of the countries that it has been for now. Also very interesting, President Kagame, Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Dr. Abiy Ahmed, taking the online challenge to wash their hands and passing on the challenge, I think, to President Kenyatta of Kenya and also presidents in the region just to encourage personal hygiene among their citizens.
All right, Senator, perhaps finally, today's normally the start of a working week. Have you seen a significant decrease in activity in and around Nairobi? Traffic is usually quite busy in the mornings and at rush hour in the evenings. Has that changed, or is it seemingly business as usual under the circumstances?
Well, with the school buses off the roads, there was reduced traffic in the morning, probably also because many parents did not have to wake up early to drop off their children to school, those who drop off their children to school. However, we've spoken to a few offices that have taken different approaches. I know of offices where if there are any women who are expectant have been asked to work from home for now. I know offices that will begin reducing staff working inside their offices beginning Thursday. Some have asked them to completely stay at home beginning Thursday. I know other offices also around the country that have issued guidelines on how to behave while you're in crowds or while in the office. And in most of the offices and public areas that we visited today, one thing that stood out was the hand sanitizers that were everywhere. And also, we are learning not to shake hands. In our culture, in a country where shaking of hands is seen as a polite way and a respectful way of receiving somebody, we are now just having to either wave or just put your hand and curtsy.
All right, and that's where we'll leave it. Sarah Kimani, a correspondent in Nairobi, Kenya, giving us an update in the region of the coronavirus situation in those countries. Asante sana.